Nietzsche said, well, God is dead and we have killed him and we'll never find the water to wash away the blood. The holiest that we have created has now died at our own hands. And he thought that was an absolute catastrophe because Nietzsche was a very smart man and a very wise man. But he made a real error, I believe, and he posited that because of this collapse of values, this precipitous collapse of the value that unifies all values, or that is the precondition for all values, that we would be lost. He certainly felt that we would fall into nihilism, or that we would fall prey to communist idolatry in particular, which he predicted dead on, just like Dostoevsky did. But then he also said the solution to that will be that the Superman will have to appear, the Übermensch, and he will be the man who can create his own values. And so both Freud and Jung were interested in that idea. Freud more peripherally, but Jung more consciously. And part of what Jung was trying to find out is, well, could we create our own values? And the answer he came up with was, no, that's not possible. And why? So the question is why? Well, for the psychoanalysts, we were beset by fantasies, and these are sort of autonomous personalities that dwell in our subconscious, let's say, in our imagination, in our dreams, and that possess us from time to time. The spirit of rage, the spirit of lust, the spirit of envy, these ancient gods that possess us, and these values and temptations and impulses that come upon us that we cannot control. They're part of our autonomous nature. And because they have this autonomy, and so that would be the autonomy of emotions and the autonomy of motivations, and then even the autonomy of the spirit that unites motivations, because we don't know, for example, in the spirit of play, for example, play is an instinct. Play integrates base motivations into a higher unity, but it's an instinct. And so Jung realized very rapidly that it wasn't technically possible for us to create our own values. And that's partly his stumbling upon the problem of complexity. So the world's just too complex for us to generate our values in the span of a single life, out of whole cloth, autonomously, no matter how much of a Superman we were.
Yeah.
And partly the reason that's impossible is, well, okay, so generate your own values. What the hell are you going to do with your wife or your husband or your friend? What are they going to, they're just going to live by your values all of a sudden? Well, that's what the postmodernists are demanding now. The radical types, it's like, my game, right? My identity. I'm whatever I say I am, moment to moment. And there's no negotiation. And that's because they're 2 years old. And I mean that. I mean that. I mean that technically. I mean, one of the things I learned partly from reading Freud had this idea of developmental fixation, and he noticed in his clients, in his patients, that people would get stuck at a developmental level. And so you'd be talking to an adult and all of a sudden they were 4 years old. And I learned to see that in my clients, and well, in people I talk to, I'll do that with if they're annoying me. Like, okay, who the hell are you? Oh, I see. You're a 13-year-old mean girl. Okay, away we go. I know who I'm talking to now. And these solipsistic identity totalitarians are 2 years old. And 2-year-olds are very governed by emotion. They're completely incapable of negotiation. They're egotistical in that their worldview dominates. They have no notion whatsoever of negotiated play. And their belief is, their identity is 100% generated by them, dependent on what they feel moment to moment, which is exactly how a 2-year-old operates. And most of them get socialized out of that by the age of 4. And those that don't have a very dismal time of it after that. So, and I think we have a lot of people like that now because screens have interfered with pretend play and negotiation, and because Oedipal parents and social systems have enabled a kind of immature narcissism that makes itself manifest in these absurd claims about identity. And that's all part of creating your own values. I can be whatever sex I want to be moment to moment. It's like, well, fine, but how are other people supposed to deal with that? Because they don't know what to do. Well, it doesn't matter. They have to do exactly what I want them to. It's like, hey, good luck with that. You Superman, you Ubermensch with your own values. And this is also partly why the small L liberal types are wrong in a fundamental sense, and this would include most therapists, is like, you might think of identity and of sanity itself as sort of an internal psychological arrangement, so you have your act together, it's sort of in your brain or in your psyche, and you're sane, and there's insane people around you, but you're sane. It's like, that isn't really right. It's sort of right, but you're sane if you're a reciprocal partner in your marriage. You're sane if you have 3 or 4 friendships that you've been able to maintain, because you can act reciprocally. And the sanity is actually the balance between you and your wife or husband, and then you and your wife or husband and your friends, or you and your wife and your husband, or your husband and your children and your friends and your larger family. It's this nested thing that we already talked about. It's like, you can't be sane in the absence of that, because that's actually the definition of sanity. And it's collective as well, as that's why the kingdom of God is within you and without you. It's exactly that. It's like, yeah, you have a harmonious psyche, but are you dancing with yourself to music that no one else can hear? That's not helpful. There's a communal element of it that has to be in place. And so if you're sane, your marriage is sane, and you have sane relationships with your children, you have sane relationships with your friends, and you're a good employee or a boss, and you're a participant in the civic world. And all of that is embedded in this hierarchy that has the spirit at the top that enables that reciprocity to operate. And you're a devotee of that, or you're not.